أون دوش ميا نفقد داش شماخ تأثي ملكوتاخ نهوي سوينخ إكنا دوش ميا أبر حولان لحمة تنكان يومنا واش وقلان حوبين إكنا داب حنان شوقن لحيوين ولا تعلن نسيونا إلا بصا من بيشة مثول دي لاخي ملكوتة حي لو تشبحته العالم عالمين. Amen. So tonight I've been wanting to talk about my basic faith and why do I follow Jesus? The Bible, and I have a lot of markers on my Bible, especially for tonight. The Bible is this thick, and to me, it all culminates in one section. That would be enough. It's available in other books, but to me, the Gospel according to St. Matthew, chapter 3, the beginning of chapter 3, all the way to chapter 27, verse 50, which is Jesus's last breath. In that part, with the additions of scribes and the disciples and so forth, they added few things, but it has the essence of what makes Jesus so special. Now, I get asked, why then this whole book? You know, what value? Why do you go anywhere else in this book? And the reason I study the book, I would say it's almost not necessary, but it gives me a foundation of how Jesus built his ministry. And it helps me talk to people who are followers of or claim to be followers of religion, Christianity with all its versions and varieties and differences, Judaism with its own history. That it gives me a good foundation of how Jesus got to where he got and why his teachings are valid to this day. So he was a spiritual genius, but more than anything, he was an amazing human being. He took centuries of history, religion, religious law, and then simplistically with his nature, brought us a version of ourselves, reminding us of who we really are and how we can exist in his time and in the future without any labels, without any need to declare yourself a follower of Jesus or a Christian or anything like that. He took away that aspect and replaced it with actions and with giving us a good understanding of our nature. So when we act from the right space. When we hurt, we understand why we're hurting. And when we are comforting, we're comforting with the right mindset. And that's really the essence of why I even do this work and why I speak and why I continue to read. So and today is no different than the last few days. The world around us is always in turmoil. My world very closely is even because of my history, my tradition. Is even more personal. You know, I'm not watching something somewhere else. And I heard for people wherever they are when they are being oppressed or suffering, especially when the reason for suffering is other people, typically their neighbors and their cousins and their relatives. So that's why. I wanted to talk tonight from my heart to give you a perspective of how Jesus got to where he got and how his teachings are so unique. Because in religion, you go to any church, and this is the book that gets waved in front of your face, the Holy Bible. I don't think a lot of, unless you go into ministerial school, and I've talked to a lot of ministers in my time doing this work, they don't even get exposed to some of the stuff I'm going to be sharing with you tonight. Because they go into more of a counseling and financing, how to run a business, how to run a church business, or so there is a lot of aspects of religion, and then the dogma of the denomination. So if you go to a Catholic priest's school, you're going to get the Catholic twist on things and their belief systems and so forth. And to be honest, it's very hard to take, what I told you. Here are the verses. If you didn't hear me, Matthew chapter 3 to Matthew, what is it that I say? 27 verse 50. That's the essence of what you need to run your life, not just a church or a business. So how did we get to Jesus this way? I like, I did say that that's about it, but I do like the initial thought that came from the writers of the first chapter in what we call the Hebrew Bible or the Old Testament, telling us about this beautiful story of creation, of God creating the universe, and seeing that it's all good, and then putting us humans in charge of Earth and pretty much the universe as smart beings, and letting us loose, giving us free will, and telling us go enjoy life, multiply, and so forth. Abraham, who some scholars debate his existence, some think he's a culmination of different people and maybe different gods that existed before the story of Abraham. But regardless of what it is, if you read the life of Abraham, it gives us a glimpse into the simplicity of this God that we complicated big time. And in our time, God has it tremendously, for people who believe in God, it's a very complex way to try. And I've asked a lot of people, it's like, what is God to you? You believe in God, you're not an atheist. And as sometimes Dr. Errico and I, it's like atheists at least have sometimes more believe in God because they are they think there is a God, but they don't believe in that God. But the God became a strange character through these many pages, and evolved in many ways. What I love about Jesus's God and Abraham's God is that it is not the central figure of their ministry. Jesus uses God as a guiding parent, a loving parent who makes everything available for us, who hurts for us when we hurt, who gives us healing, gives us rain when we need rain, which is goodness, gives us food when we need food, and does that to all creation. Yet God never starts wars, never, and according to Jesus, God never punishes people. People punish people, society punish people, the laws, the human laws punish people, and typically we punish ourselves. And that's why we have terms in Aramaic that come to us like Gehenna Denura, mental torment, hellfire. And we feel that. I think people who can kill 1,000 people or kill one person, they're human, unless there is something tweaked about them mentally, something really more of an illness that they suffer from that causes them to do that harm. If they are fully functional and thinking and reflective and so forth, that catches up with them. That creates hellfire in their life. And no matter whatever the reason is to do that, self-defense, which is a topic that you could debate, protection from the other person. People debate these things, but ultimately, if you take the life of another human being, you're going to violate something inside you that will torment you, no matter how you rationalize that later. So Jesus takes away that God, that the worship of God, the focus of God, and replaces it with this loving presence. Think of God as a cloud on a very hot sunny day. And that's the God of Jesus. It gives you comfort. You feel the coolness. You feel that when you're thirsty, or that your land is parched, and that cloud gives you a little bit of rain, and you can see things springing into life, and it feels good, and maybe your livelihood depends on that. That's God. That's how Jesus brought us God. Now, if I go back, and I wanted to go back, because there are people who believe or go to church, they believe that everything, Moses was a prophet, Isaiah was a prophet, this king was a good king, David was a Messiah and a prophet, or a Mashiach, an anointed one, Solomon was a good king. But because we are told that it's like they're prophets, they talk to God, and they do the work of God, and they're the chosen one of their time, and so forth. So we bundle them, and yet if you look at them individually, none of them had that clarity that Jesus brought us. He built on some of the good things that they did, but he also highlighted things that were not good about them or about their time. And he did not judge it. He just basically said, we can't be that way. So now I'm going to get a bit more technical, and I'm going to kind of dig into the foundation of these religions. So Jesus at his time was considered a follower of the Mosaic law, or the Mosaic religion, Judaism. So we use the term Jew. So he was a Palestinian Jew living in Nazareth, growing up in Nazareth, and under Roman occupation, a lot of hostile other minor kingdoms around them, all under Roman rule, but they had also their natives, the people who lived in the land. So the Romans did not kill everybody when they went into a land. They actually occupied it because they wanted the people to continue to farm, so they can pay the taxes, so they can ship wheat to Rome, so they can pay the taxes and support the Roman armies, and feed the Roman armies that were there. They did not annihilate everybody. So Jesus is growing up under that, but also is watching his religion. Now, the Jewish religion, I think the religion itself, the Israelites and the story of Abraham, and then his descendants, Isaac and Jacob, and all the descendants, including going to Egypt, leaving the Holy Land and going to Egypt. All that kind of takes place in Genesis. Then we come into Exodus. And in Exodus, we see this figure, Moses, showing up. And Moses was about to organize the tribes of Israel into a nation. And he is about to build a religion, a set of rules. If you read Exodus and Leviticus, which is the time of Moses, they are loaded, and Deuteronomy. They're loaded with rules and regulations. Okay, so Moses comes in. First thing, the God of Moses is carried in a box with Moses, and is tented. They build a tent for him, and for this God. So that's why I'm saying, like the God of Abraham would fall asleep under a tree and talk to God, and dream about a conversation with God, or chat with him. That's why Abraham was called God's pal. His God was a personal relationship with this guidance. He bargains with God, and so forth. So that's why I'm saying, if you read Abraham and the rest of Genesis, you'll get from the creation story, the messed up story of Adam and Eve, which a lot of dogma is built on that. And that's a second creation story. Dr. Errico has a lot of talks about it. I've mentioned it in different talks. If you're interested, let us know, and we can point you in the right direction. But ultimately, that's where Moses shows up, and the Jewish people at the time, a lot of them were oppressed in Egypt. And he decides, I'm going to take you out. I'm going to take you back to the land that we should be in. And yet he got lost for 40 years and never saw that land. But then in the meantime, he's setting up all these rules. One of the things that he sets up is the Ten Commandments. And the Ten Commandments begins with, I am, because now that Moses started speaking with God and acting on behalf of God with the tribes. So that when he brought us the Ten Commandments, he brought his people the Ten Commandments. They didn't have a lot of punitive side to them. Basically, he said the law. Then you only believe in this one God. Then you don't kill, you don't commit adultery, you honor your parents, and so forth and so on. Then Moses goes and says, you know what? I need to have a nation, and a nation built on a religion, because his power came from God. So he needed this God according to Exodus, the people asked him, please don't let God talk with us, because they were scared of God. So he's like, okay, I will do the talking and I'll bring you whatever God's commandments are. You see now how the difference between the concept of Jesus is God versus Moses is God. So Moses' God is very zealous, does not want them to believe in any other gods, and he's setting up society now. So you can imagine, when you set up these rules, that means that there is a need for them. So Moses was looking around him with these tribes. They're committing, they're violating each other's property, committing adultery, which is a property law. I mean, stronger men were taking the wives of other men. People were killing each other, and it was both a tribal and a fairly primitive time during Moses. Though they came from Egypt, which has a little bit more of a civilization organized, but also had the concepts of gods and men of gods, and that the families that were ruling Egypt were considered part of the god system, kind of like a bridge. So Moses is mimicking some of that, with the exception that instead of all these gods that are the sun and the river and so forth, the moon and other things, he took the God of Abraham as his guidance, which is a spiritual God. But he still can contain him in a box, can take him with him. So Moses gives us the Ten Commandments. And I will start contrasting this now with Jesus. I took all my notes and put them somewhere. There they are. So no other, he told them you can't believe in any other gods. He told them not to create any graven images. He didn't. One of the things that differentiated the God of Israel with the other gods is that it's a spiritual God, so you can't make any image. And now, even after Moses was given that, he went away for a short while, and his own people took gold and molded it into a golden calf, and took that calf and started praying for the calf. It's a god of the land that they lived in. So that tells you that first there is a spiritual need that they had, and they delegated it, or used this idol basically to become their god. I think the essence of the story is that they are now, Moses is trying to mold them into this spiritual nation based on Elohim or the Ethia Rabbah or the Allah that Abraham brought to awareness. So the people now, one of the things that now I'm going to go to Matthew. One of the Ten Commandments. The Ten Commandments, by the way, are in Exodus chapter 20. I don't want to read them all, but if you have the time, go ahead as you're listening to this, maybe later, because I'm going to cover a lot of things. Okay, so the commandments are: I am the Lord your God who brought you out of the land of Egypt. You shall have no other gods except me. You shall not make any images, and you shall not take false oath in the name of the Lord. See, Jesus addressed all these things. He took that face value, because, you know, continuing like to verse 13, you shall not kill, you shall not commit adultery, you shall not steal, you shall not bear false witness. Now contrast this with just boom, 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 boom. Okay, laws. And then he goes later, because the people ask, like anybody would, it's like, but what if I do steal? Or what if somebody else steals? What do we do with them? They will, Moses set rules. You get killed. You get killed. So for a lot of these things, they just stoned you to death or killed you. Later, he modified some of these things where it got a bit more complicated. And because he was creating the religion, he couldn't do all the service of God by himself. He would have been spending all the time in the tent with God and coming back with, it was like, God talked to me, God didn't talk to me. So he took his brother and his brother's bloodline, at the time his brother's sons, and made them priests. So now you're seeing how the religion is built, and then created a lot of instructions of how to build the temple or the tabernacle, where and it was a tent initially with all these things that went into it, and they carried it as they were migrating, trying to find their promised land. So he had his brother and his sons come out of society and become priestly. So now you're seeing a creation of the priesthood, early priesthood, and with that priesthood, the tribes needed to feed the priests, needed to take care of them, because they're no longer foraging for food and getting the stuff they need to live, to make a living. So now Moses starts setting all the rules of how to feed them. Now, initially, he just sets up you give basically. So he talks about financing this new religion. Now, if you take it today to any church, that's the model that the church follows, is the original Moses model. You have to go to the building, you have to pray there, you have to tithe. And on top of tithing, you bring in, you get the coffee this Sunday, I get the cake next Sunday, you get the meal afterwards, and so forth. And we don't expect the ministers to do that, because the ministers are just focused on taking care of the church. So we support them. And that's the model that, and then with Moses has a ton of rules. If you're bored out of your mind and you want to go read Exodus and Leviticus, and you'll see all the rules he says. Now, eventually, even those rules evolve enough that the crimes become a bit more complicated. It's not as simple as if you steal, if you hit a woman who is pregnant. I marked some of these things. I'm going to read them just because they're kind of fun. And you're going to question my sense of fun. So let's see, 2024. For some reason, I highlighted that. An altar of earth shall you make to me. So this is God telling Moses, you make me altars. Okay, so and the purpose of the altar is for them to burn offerings. Okay, I'll just read it. And you shall sacrifice on it your burnt offerings and your peace offerings, your sheep and your oxen, and every place where you shall make a memorial to my name, I will come to you and I will bless you. So see, this God now is almost like a materialistic God. You make the offerings which feed the priestly clan, and the offerings could be for different reasons. Just a peace offering, a burnt offering, something eventually becomes like an offense that you committed something, you did something wrong, you walked on the Sabbath, you insulted your parents, whatever. You did something that violated the rules. That was your way out. You go and you do the offering. And it shall make, and if you make me a stone altar, you shall not build it of hewn stone, for if you lift a tool of iron for some reason that Moses did not like, or God did not like people to shape the stuff. They just wanted a quick altar to be put together. And I love verse 26. Because remember, now they're coming from Egypt. Egypt had the pyramids. They figured out how to build things to go up high and stairs and steps. But in verse 26, this is God telling Moses, by the way, when you build me an altar, neither shall you go up by steps to my altar, that your nakedness be not exposed on it. So at the time of Moses, they wrapped a cloth that was their covering of their private areas, and if they had steps, God did not want to see, people who are sitting below. They didn't want to see the priest going up or whoever is making the offering, so they didn't want them to expose their private parts. So think about this is the God of Moses giving instructions of what an altar needs to be like. I'm not gonna get anywhere near that. So last time we went short because I had a very intense message a couple of weeks ago. This time I don't think I'm even gonna get close to being done, which means that in a couple of weeks I'll have more to say. Hopefully you're having fun with me. I'm having fun with this one. So continuing Exodus 22, this is where okay, chapter 21, verse 22. This is where he's covering an eye for an eye. If two men quarrel and strike a woman with child, so that this is again the thinking that she miscarries, so a pregnant, a woman with child, so that she miscarries, and yet no mischief follows. So nothing else happens, just by, do you see that the people behind is like, okay, what if it was an accident? So here's talking specifically. If it's an accident, you bump into a woman who is pregnant, she loses the child, here are the rules. But then he goes to, but if any mischief follows, then you shall give life for life. See, if it's intentional, and then it's life for life. You're now going to kill the person who bumped into that woman. An eye for an eye, tooth for tooth, hand for hand, foot for foot, burning for burning, wound for wound, slap for slap. This is tribal mindset. This is vengeance. This is taking your revenge right there, equal revenge on the spot. There are a lot of countries to this day have this written into their law with some asterisks and modifications. Now contrast that with Jesus. I'm going to Matthew 5:38. So Jesus, as complicated as all these rules are, Jesus took all of them and distilled them to like a really practical way for us to live with. And his trick was to go root cause. So Matthew 5:38, you have heard, and there in this section of Matthew, there is a lot of you have heard, and you can, maybe I'll cover some of them. You have heard that it is said, an eye for an eye. So he's speaking very specifically at Moses and his law, and a tooth for a tooth. But I say to you, okay, see, this is why if you're a follower of Jesus, you don't need to follow Moses. You need to follow Jesus, okay? And that can create a conflict in your life. If you're trying to please both, how can you reconcile that? Now, what most people do is they pick which side they want. Most ministers, when they're talking, if they want to prove a point, they can go to Moses, they can pick from David, they can pick from a prophet, or they can go to Jesus. I say to me, that's the definition of heresy. I never call anybody a heretic or put that on them. But if you're listening to somebody who's picking bits and pieces of the Bible and not following, they're telling you, come here because this is a church, we call this Christianity. This is a church based on the teachings of Jesus. And then they start sneaking in the other stuff that conflicts with Jesus. I would call a timeout on them. I'd throw, like in football, I'd throw a flag and say, a timeout. How can you reconcile this part of the Bible and what Jesus taught with that? Same thing with Paul. Paul teaches some things that contradict Jesus. Call him out. Say, hey, this is not what Jesus is teaching. It's a pinnacle. Jesus is a pinnacle, and the stuff that came before him led to him, but it's not at the same level. Now it has glimpses of what he was going to be bringing, and the stuff that came after him did the same thing, kind of started descending down to the religion that we have today. That causes a lot of people not to understand God, not to understand, more importantly, not to understand themselves, not to be able to actually use their spirituality and their soul in their day-to-day living. You know, we've condemned people in a way and put a religion or religions on them. And I can't speak, I'm talking about the religions what we call the Abraham-based religions, the monotheistic God religions. Other religions have their own evolution and devolution. So, but I'll let the masters of Buddhism and Hinduism and Taoism and all that, they can speak about that, because same thing, a lot of goodness, and there are pinnacles, and there are high points, and then but the religion has that history. So if you're talking about the whole ascending and descending, and you can pick from any point any point of that history, then you're not really following the teachings of Jesus. You're not acting from your highest human level. That's why we see wars today, because they're coming from these tribal mindsets. So, but I say to you that you should not resist evil. So the difference, so a slap for a slap, Jesus says, but whoever strikes you on your right cheek, turn to him the other also. This is not a sign of weakness. And I know a lot of people, and I've already on this specific verse, I've had people on YouTube come back to me and say, I can't follow that. It does not apply. On its own, I'm not telling you this is the only thing that you do and build your life on it, but build your life on the whole ministry of Jesus. And this one makes sense. The way early Christianity, early followers of Jesus changed the world, and the way we need to change the world today, is by fully implementing it. They lost people. Because they understood that, they stopped fearing death. That's part of Jesus's message. Death is not the end, according to him. But living life in fear of death or in fear of anything, that is true death. That's your torment. Okay, so do you live a daily torment, hoping to reach heaven with that mindset in an afterlife? Or do you live your life in peace today and set the standard of what you're willing to tolerate and what you're not willing to tolerate, and speak? Isaiah has a beautiful section about the Christ consciousness. What made Jesus special? Isaiah got to the bottom of it, because as he was defining what a Christ is, what a Mashiach, what an anointed soul is, which is what Jesus came to do in all of us. He came to bring that back out of us. This is Isaiah. I'm all over the place today, so bear with me. Well, now Isaiah, because he's a Jewish prophet, he's speaking and taking us to the Jewish times. Okay, so, and there shall come forth a shoot out of the stem of Jesse, and a branch shall grow out of his roots. Okay, so this verse is why the Christian writers of the Bible try to tie Jesus to the line of Jesse or the line of King David. Okay, so that's not what Isaiah was talking about, but that's why they used that to say, oh, look, Jesus came out of that, just like Isaiah predicted. Now, think about the qualities of that now Isaiah is going to bring out in this Messiah. And he shall be at peace, and the Spirit of the Lord shall rest upon him, the Spirit of wisdom and understanding, the Spirit of counsel and might, the spirit of knowledge, of the reverence, and of the reverence of the Lord, and shall shine forth in the reverence of the Lord, and he shall not judge after that which his eyes see. See, he does not get tricked by what he's seeing beyond that. Neither reprove after that which his ears hear. Again, he sees beyond, he listens beyond what the physical evidence in front of him are. But with justice shall he judge the poor, and reprove with uprightness for the meek of the earth. Do you see how this ties to Jesus? Who's going to inherit the earth? Blessed or delighted are the meek. Delighted are the peacemakers. This is where Jesus picked up this. And when I'm talking about the peaks and how he took the right steps, he picked the right pieces to step on to get to that pinnacle, to bring us those teachings. That's what makes Jesus so special, is that he picked up this and he implemented it. He implemented it on himself, and it took him time. He was about 29, 30 years old when he was able to even bring this up to his community. And his initial community rejected him. He had to go and find these young fishermen and young men and women who listened and understood. They were tired of the oppression. They were tired of religion. Religion was not helping them, okay? Because religion, again, was picking and choosing. And for about 400 years, Israel or the Jewish people did not have prophets like their traditional prophets. So a lot of what was happening then is law. It's like, okay, we have new issues, we have new problems, we have a new occupier. How do we deal with them? Well, we revolt, we resist with weapons, we resist peacefully, we work with them. And in the meantime, we need to support the temple, and we need to support the priests and the rabbis and so forth. So a lot of burdens, because the occupiers who were coming in, the Romans had their own taxes, and the Jewish people had more taxes put on them by the temple and by the authority. Jesus was watching all these dynamics and trying to figure out, how do I lift my people out of this into their full human potential, and do it without condemning the Romans, because they are also children of God, without condemning all my neighbors, because they're all children of God, regardless of what religion and what temple and what God they carry in their pocket or they go visit on top of a mountain. That's why he reached out to the Samaritans. That's why he taught his disciples and apostles as we continue with their work. He gave them all the foundational pieces. His pinnacle, that top of the mountain that he reached, was the foundation for the early movement to continue to build higher. But unfortunately, in time, it started descending. And once it started descending, we are where we are today, where we are investing so much in our defense contracts, in our defense budgets. We're building armies, and we're building weapons that can destroy this earth over and over and over and over, this heaven that we have, and border lines and ways to shoot each other's weapons, and letting that hatred fester in different communities. That the movement of the 99% that we had a few years ago should have focused on our humanity, because over 99% of people want to live life in peace. They want to prosper, eat, feel safe, travel, get to know each other, get exposed to different cultures, to different cuisines, or live in their own little town if that's their wish and that's the way they are, but feel safe, that nobody is going to come and break into their house or have a mass shooting in a supermarket or in a restaurant. They want that's what our deepest desire is. And we have the keys, and the keys have been in our hands for centuries now. But we continue to fumble them and give the power and give the authority to and elect people, whether we elect them or join them in a revolt in different countries, or let them rule over us because they belong to this bloodline or that bloodline. the good ones, and I've seen good ones come from all of these systems, and I've seen bad ones come from all the same exact systems. The good ones bring prosperity and peace, and they try to take care of their community. And the communities are complex, and the laws are complex, but simplifying them is the answer, not complicating them. Building the people from the ground up, eliminating the issues that we can eliminate. That's where Jesus gives us the tools. In sharing and in loving and in forgiving and in working together. And yes, maybe the initial steps, just like his early movement, stumbled and they were oppressed and so forth. Eventually, they became known as the good people. They didn't have to have a cross, wear a cross or anything. They were just the good people in community. And he changed a lot of things. In Moses, you had to circumcise. His apostles, when you go to the book of Acts, when they ran into that problem, they said, that's not important. That's a rule that is a burden on people. So they wanted the door to the kingdom to be open for everybody. So they waived that rule. It's like, if you're circumcised or if you want to circumcise, go for it. If you're not, that's fine. You can come in anyway. Same thing, people who were eating forbidden, unclean meats and bugs and so forth, because that's what people knew, and that was their cuisine. Do I keep you from entering the kingdom because of that? Because if you read the law of Moses, this is unclean, and this is unclean, and this is unclean, and a woman is unclean when after birth, and a woman is unclean when she has her period, and they had all these regulations. Moses was building a very, very strict culture because he was dealing with fairly primitive people who were all over the place. So he tried to control them. But he didn't have the science. He didn't have the things that we know today. So I'm not blaming Moses, because you have to take Moses in the context of his time, in the context of the people he's dealing with. So, and he was a stepping stone on the way to that top of the mountain that Jesus got to. So were the prophets. And with that, I think this is a good spot to slow down. I'll continue the story. I have the story of the prophets. I actually have it on my screen. I was going to share my screen and show you how the prophets need to be understood to be able to get to where Jesus got with their work. Now, I have a couple of questions, so I'll go ahead, hopefully. And if you want to keep me going, if I don't, just to honor your time, I will answer the questions. And if you don't have any more, I'll go ahead and speak a little bit more, so you don't feel like you didn't get your full time.